24 hours ago, we told you that the 3 oil companies involved in the Gulf spill had all testified the other companies were at fault. In our 4th story tonight, we now know they were all right. As this video taken yesterday shows, oil continues to gush into the Gulf at the rate of about 200,000 gallons a day, almost 4 million gallons, all told so far. BP's efforts to contain the spill, including last week's failed placement of a 100-ton cap, are both untested at this depth and so far unsuccessful, with environmental groups now questioning the environmental impacts of BP's cleanup efforts, specifically a chemical used to disperse the oil, nearly 400,000 gallons of which BP has already dumped into the Gulf now. Yesterday, an executive from Halliburton described in what sounded then like positive terms testing done earlier on the day of the blast to make sure Halliburton's cement seal would prevent gases from leaking into the oil line.
The next step included the performance of a negative pressure test, which tests the integrity of the casing seal assembly and is conducted by the drilling contractor at the direction of the well owner and in accordance with MMS requirements. We understand that Halliburton was instructed to record drill pipe pressure during this test. After being advised by the drilling contractor that the negative test had been completed, Halliburton's cementing personnel were placed on standby.
Today, Congressman Henry Waxman revealed the truth about the supposedly fail-safe blowout preventer and the cementing test that Halliburton had described so positively yesterday.
Halliburton, one of the world's largest oil service companies, says that it had secured the well through a procedure called cementing and that the well had passed a key pressure test. But we now know this is an incomplete account. The well did pass positive pressure tests, but there is evidence that it may not have passed crucial negative pressure tests. According to a senior BP official, significant pressure discrepancies were observed in at least 2 of these tests, which were conducted just hours before the explosion. Transocean, one of the world's largest operator of drilling rigs, says it has no reason to believe that the rig's fail-safe device, called a blowout preventer, was not fully operational. But we have learned from Cameron, the manufacturer of the blowout preventer, that the device had a leak in a crucial hydraulic system and a defectively configured ram.
Internal Transocean documents reveal the fail-safe blowout preventer had 260 known scenarios for failure back in 2001. And this one had been modified so that one of the rams it uses to force the pipe shut did not work, which no one knew for the first 24 hours of trying to make it work and stop the spill, perhaps because the schematics they were working from did not reflect those modifications. Another ram did not work because hydraulic fluid had leaked out through a loose fitting beforehand. The dead man trigger did not activate either, maybe because the battery was dead. How could a fail-safe have so many failures? Huffington Post today quoting an oil industry whistleblower who says he witnessed cheating on blowout preventer testing, including some of BP's. And on the same day we learned all this, Senators John Kerry and Joe Lieberman had introduced a long-awaited climate change bill that gives coastal states veto power but still encourages offshore drilling. Let's turn now to David Korn, Washington bureau chief for Mother Jones magazine and a columnist for politicsdaily.com. David, good evening.
Good evening, Keith.
What do the revelations today tell us about the distinction between, quote, routine offshore drilling and this deep water casino gambling version?
Well, a big difference, and I think a big point to keep in mind, is that there was another hearing today down in Kenner, Louisiana, before the Coast Guard and the Minerals Management Service that was supposed to regulate these sort of rigs. And it turns out that the regulations that cover these rigs were written back in 1978, when you and I were both young men. And back in those days, too, they didn't have this type of deep water offshore drilling. Drilling was much closer in. So we've had decades of oil companies moving further out, deeper down, and now the government saying, hey, you know this equipment that works in a couple hundred feet of water and all the safety precautions we've come up with for that, it may not be applicable when we get too far out and too far down. And no one was thinking about that. And the oil companies, of course, and Halliburton and the manufacturers were not thinking, too, about how to make their rigs and their products safe for such use. It was just, let's find the oil, and I think it was Markey or Congressman Markey who said they were conducting just one big science experiment.
Yeah.
And guess what? It went bad.
Well, and to that the point, the executives testified today that the blowout preventers cannot handle every situation, especially if they get clogged with debris from something like, a blowout, which then raises the question, is it fair to punish these companies for promising their blowout preventers would prevent blowouts when, of course, blowout preventers might not work properly if there's, a blowout?
So maybe they should be called blowout maybe preventers.
Yeah.
They may work. I mean, again, this stuff had not been tested appropriately. Regulations had not been set for these things. And, we collectively, the U.S. government, and people out there who always talk about, and decry big government bureaucrats and all, and environmental regulations. There was no culture in the Department of Interior and the Mineral Management Service to take into account what was going on and how to regulate this. So we just basically, as came out in all the hearings so far, this was sort of self-regulation. Industry got to self-certify that the things they called blowout preventers would actually prevent blowouts, even if they didn't.
It's a brand name, and in fact, the shorthand for it, for blowout preventers, the shorthand is just blow. Are the companies going to be in, speaking of deep, are they in deep sheep dip, or will they end up doing just as well as Exxon has since Valdez?
I think BP is still pretty deep in it, and they've gone on record saying they're going to cover all the costs. Not that includes economic losses that result from this. I mean, if we still haven't stopped this oil from spilling out. I was on a call with the White House and administration advisors. This could take weeks. It could take months. We don't know what the total bill is going to be, so BP could still be on the hook at the end of the day and may not, conceivably might not survive. Halliburton seems to always survive. I don't know why that is. Transocean, the company that built the rig, that these companies are a little bit, I think, less in the public eye than BP. So they're gone, and of course there are other companies out there drilling away. We haven't, closed down these rigs, and they're all using, I assume, similar equipment and operating under the similar set of principles and regulations that didn't work in this case. So maybe there are other companies that are worrying about becoming the next BP.
No, big picture though, obviously there have been public opinion against offshore drilling before today's news. Is offshore drilling going to survive in this Kerry Lieberman climate change bill?
Well, we don't even know if the bill will survive and what legs it has, but in the bill as released, it had sort of a push me, pull you attitude towards offshore drilling. It has a moratorium until this current spill is investigated, and it gives states that may be affected by spills the ability to veto, offshore drilling. But at the same time, it gave states that want to go ahead with offshore drilling a real powerful financial incentive. They get a lot of money if they do this. So there are both sides there, and it certainly doesn't shut down offshore drilling in the long run. David Korn of Mother Jones Magazine and PoliticsDaily.com. Thank you again, David. Thanks, Keith.